The transport ship shook as it docked, with the massive space station floating in the dark void between stars. Hana gripped her seat and looked out the small window at the structure that would decide humanity's future. The Galactic Combat Arena was bigger than any city she had ever seen. Its crystal walls glowed with strange alien lights, and thousands of ships from different worlds were docked around it like metal flowers surrounding a giant glass tree. Hana stood up and checked her simple Earth military uniform one last time. She was not wearing any armor or special equipment, just the plain green cloth that every human soldier wore back home. Her black hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her dark eyes showed no fear, even though her heart was beating fast. She knew that in a few hours she would be fighting creatures that could tear steel apart with their bare hands. The airlocks opened with a loud hiss, and Hana stepped onto the station. The first thing that hit her was the smell. It was like a mixture of ozone metal and something sweet that made her nose wrinkle. The second thing was the noise. Thousands of different voices speaking in languages she had never heard before created a constant buzzing sound that filled the air. The floor beneath her feet was made of some kind of crystal that felt warm even through her boots. Strange symbols glowed beneath the surface, and she could feel a slight vibration as if the entire station was alive. Overhead, the ceiling stretched up so high that she could barely see it, and floating platforms carried aliens of all shapes and sizes from level to level. Hana had studied every piece of information Earth had about the different alien species, but seeing them in person was still shocking. A group of tall blue creatures with 4 arms walked past her. Their skin looked like polished stone, and they moved with a grace that no human could match. These were the Valans she remembered from her briefings. They were known for being incredibly strong and fast. Near a food vendor, she saw her first Threx. The insect-like alien was about her height, but much wider. Its 6 legs moved in perfect coordination, and its large compound eyes seemed to look in all directions at once. When it noticed her staring, it clicked its mandibles together in what might have been a greeting or a threat. She could not tell which, but it was the crowd gathering near the central arena that made her stomach clench with nervous energy and all. The middle of a ring of cheering spectators stood the current champion, Kim Jisoo, was everything the reports had described and more. She was 8 feet tall with natural armor plating covering her arms and legs. Her skin was a deep red color, and her hands ended in claws that could cut through most metals. Jisoo was demonstrating her fighting skills for the crowd, and each movement was like watching lightning strike. She moved so fast that Hana could barely follow her attacks. The heavy training dummy she was hitting exploded into pieces with each punch, and the crowd roared its approval. Every alien species represented seemed to worship her strength and skill. This is what Hana had to beat. This was the creature that stood between humanity and the resources they needed to survive back on Earth. Park Minho found her standing at the edge of the crowd, watching the demonstration. He was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council and the only other human on the station. His face was pale, with worry as he approached her. "She is even more impressive in person than in the videos," he said quietly, so that the nearby aliens could not hear him. "Are you sure about this, Hana? Maybe we should try to negotiate for smaller mining rights somewhere else." Hana shook her head without taking her eyes off the champion. "I did not come here to ask for scraps. Minho Earth needs the Kepler system, and the only way to get it is to win this tournament. But look at her," Minho whispered. "She has never lost a fight in 5 years. She has beaten opponents twice her size. The betting odds against you are 1,000 to 1 good." Hana replied with a small smile. "That means if anyone is brave enough to bet on me, they will make a lot of money." They walked together toward the registration area, passing more alien spectators along the way. Hana noticed how they looked at her. Some seemed curious about the human they had heard about. Others appeared amused, as if they were watching a child who thought she could fight adults. A few looked openly hostile, as if her presence here was an insult to their warrior traditions. The registration booth was run by a strange floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light. It spoke in a voice that sounded like music mixed with static. "Please state your species and your reason for entering the tournament." Human Hana replied clearly. "Captain Lee, Hana representing Earth. I am here to compete for the championship." The creature pulsed with different colors. As it processed this information, you understand that this is a combat tournament with real risk of injury or death. You understand that no weapons are allowed and that matches continue until surrender or incapacitation. You understand that the current champion has held her title for 5 consecutive years. "I understand," Hana said. The creature handed her a small device that attached to her wrist. "This will monitor your vital signs and automatically stop any match if you are in mortal danger. It will also translate languages and provide basic information about your opponents. Do you have any questions about the rules?" "Just one," Hana said. "When do we start?" "In 2 hours," came the reply. "You will have time to rest and prepare." The first round. Matches will begin with the sunset ceremony as they walked away from the registration area. Minho looked even more worried. 2 hours is not very long to prepare for something like this. "Maybe you should spend the time studying your first opponent." "Already know everything I need to know about my first opponent," Hana said calmly. "And my second opponent, and my third opponent, I have been studying recordings of every fighter in this tournament for months, but studying recordings is not the same as actually fighting them," Minho protested. "These creatures have natural advantages that humans simply do not possess." "That is exactly why I am going to win," Hana replied. "They are used to fighting opponents who try to match them, strength for strength, speed for speed, but I am not going to fight them the way they expect to be fought." They found a quiet observation deck where Hana could sit and meditate before the tournament began. Through the transparent walls, she could see the stars stretching out in all directions and the lights of ships arriving from across the galaxy. Everyone was coming to watch the tournament that would decide who controlled the richest mining system. In this part of space, Minho sat beside her, and they watched the aliens preparing for the opening ceremony. Vendors were selling food and souvenirs, gamblers were taking bets on the matches, news reporters from different worlds were setting up their equipment to broadcast the fights across the galaxy. "This is bigger than I expected," Minho said quietly. "The whole galaxy is watching this tournament." Good Hana replied, "Let them watch. Let them see what humans can do when we set our minds to something." "But what if you lose?" Minho asked. "What happens to Earth then?" "Then we find another way," Hana said. "But I am not planning to lose. I have been training for this my entire life. Every martial art, every fighting technique, every strategy I have learned has been leading up to this moment." She stood up and began stretching, her muscles preparing her body for the battles ahead. In a few minutes, the tournament would begin, and she would face opponents who were stronger, faster, and more naturally gifted than any human. But she had something they did not have. She had the accumulated fighting knowledge of an entire species that had spent thousands of years learning how to defeat bigger, stronger enemies. The sunset ceremony began with a blast of horns that echoed through the station. Lights dimmed and spotlights focused. On the central arena, it was time for the tournament to begin. It was time for Lee Hana to show the galaxy what humanity could accomplish. The arena floor was made of the same crystal material as the rest of the station, but it felt different under Hana's feet. It seemed to absorb sound and energy, making every step feel important. The crowd had grown to thousands of aliens, all packed into the viewing areas that surrounded the fighting ring. Their voices created a wall of noise that would have been overwhelming if not for the translation device on her wrist. The tournament master, called the Arbiter, stood in the center of the arena. He was taller than any creature Hana had ever seen, and his body seemed to be made of pure energy that shifted between different colors. As he spoke, His voice echoed through the entire station without any need for amplification. The first round will now begin, he announced. Each fighter will face their assigned opponent in single combat. The match continues until surrender or incapacitation. No weapons are permitted, only natural abilities and hand-to-hand combat. The winner advances to the next round. Hana looked at the bracket display that appeared in the air above the arena. She was matched against someone called Rexul from the world of Pyros. According to her research, he was one of the most dangerous first-round opponents possible. His species lived on a planet covered in active volcanoes, and their bodies had adapted to survive in extreme heat. Their skin was like molten rock, and their strength could crush boulders. The crowd seemed excited about this matchup. Many of them had probably bet on Rexul to eliminate the human quickly. It would be an entertaining way to start the tournament. Rexul entered the arena from the opposite side, and Hana got her first good look at her opponent. He was even more impressive in person than in the recordings. Standing over 7 feet tall, his entire body seemed to glow with internal heat. Steam rose from his skin, and when he moved, small pieces of the crystal floor cracked under his weight. His eyes were like burning coals, and when he smiled, his teeth looked like they were made of black metal. The crowd cheered as he raised his massive arms above his head. He was clearly a favorite among the spectators. Several aliens were chanting his name in their various languages, and the betting displays showed odds heavily in his favor. Hana walked to her position in the center of the arena. She looked tiny compared to her opponent, but she showed no signs of fear or nervousness. She had studied Rexul's fighting style for weeks, and she knew exactly what he would try to do. The Arbiter raised his staff of pure energy. "When this touches the ground, the match will begin," he announced. "Are both fighters ready?" Rexul roared his acceptance, shaking the entire arena with the sound. Hana simply nodded. The staff touched the ground with a sound like thunder. Rexul immediately charged forward with surprising speed for his size. His plan was obvious: end the fight quickly with overwhelming force. His massive fist came down toward Hana's head like a falling meteor. The crowd held its breath, expecting to see the human crushed in the opening seconds, but Hana was no longer there. She had rolled to the side at the last possible moment, studying the timing of his attack as his fist hit the crystal floor. It created a crater 3 feet deep, but she was already moving behind him. Her months of training in zero-gravity combat had taught her how to use momentum and positioning instead of relying on strength. Rexul spun around faster than she had expected, but she was ready for that too. Instead of trying to dodge his backhand swing, she ducked under it and grabbed his extended arm. Using his own forward motion against him, she planted her feet and threw him across the arena floor. The crowd fell completely silent. Rexul hit the far wall with a crash that shook the entire station. He struggled to his feet, looking confused and angry. No one had ever thrown him before. His volcanic world had made his people incredibly strong, but it had also made them predictable. They relied on raw power instead of technique. Now he was truly angry. Steam began pouring from his skin as his internal temperature rose. He charged again, but this time he was more careful. Instead of one massive punch, he unleashed a series of strikes, each one capable of shattering stone. But Hana flowed around his attacks like water. She had memorized the anatomy of his species from the databases on Earth. His nerve clusters were in slightly different places than a human's, but the principles were the same. Strike the right points with the right amount of force, and even the strongest opponent could be stopped. She waited for the perfect opening. When Rexul overextended on a particularly powerful punch, she stepped inside his guard and struck 3 specific points on his neck and shoulder. The effect was immediate. His left arm went completely numb, and his balance faltered. The crowd began to murmur in disbelief. This was not how these fights usually went. Rexul tried to compensate by using only his right arm, but Hana had already adapted to his new fighting pattern. She struck 2 more nerve points, and his right leg buckled. Within minutes, the mighty warrior from Pyros was on his knees, unable to coordinate. His movements, Hana stood over him waiting. She could have continued the attack and knocked him unconscious, but she wanted to give him the chance to surrender with dignity. After a long moment, Rexul raised his good hand in defeat. The gesture sent shockwaves through the crowd. They had never seen anything like this before. The arbiter declared Hana the winner, and the crowd erupted in confused chatter. Some aliens were demanding to know how the human had won. Others were frantically changing their bets for the next round. But Hana was already thinking about her second opponent. Velkryn was a spider-like creature from the shadow world of Arachnis. His species had evolved in complete darkness, developing incredible speed and reflexes to hunt by sound and vibration alone. His 8 legs could move independently, and his claws were coated with a paralytic venom that could stop a heart in seconds. The crowd expected this match to be different. They assumed that Rexul's defeat had been a fluke caused by overconfidence. Velkryn was smarter and faster. He would not make the same mistakes. When the second match began, Velkryn did not charge like Rexul. Instead, he circled Hana carefully, his 8 eyes studying her movements. His legs moved in a hypnotic pattern designed to confuse prey before striking. But Hana did not wait for him to attack. She moved with fluid precision, using martial arts techniques that combined traditional earth-fighting styles with zero-gravity combat training. Instead of trying to match his speed, she predicted where he would be before he knew it himself. Every species had patterns. Velkryn's people had evolved to hunt specific types of prey in specific ways. Those instincts made them deadly, but they also made them predictable to someone who had studied them carefully. When Velkryn finally struck, his attack was lightning fast, but Hana was already moving to intercept. She caught one of his legs as it passed and used his own momentum to slam him into the arena floor. Before he could recover, she had struck the nerve cluster at the base of his skull. The spider creature collapsed instantly, his nervous system overloaded by the precise strike. The crowd was no longer just murmuring, they were beginning to panic. Their assumptions about human weakness were being shattered with each passing minute. By the end of the second hour, Hana had won 4 matches. Each victory had been more impressive than the last. She had defeated opponents who were stronger, faster, and more naturally gifted than any human. But what she lacked in raw physical ability, she made up for with intelligence, adaptability, and thousands of years of human martial arts evolution. As she walked back to the preparation area for a brief rest before the next round, she could feel the eyes of every creature in the arena following her. The human was no longer a curiosity or an amusing underdog. She had become something far more dangerous. She had become a threat. The championship fight continued for another 20 minutes, each exchange more intense than the last. Kim Jisoo threw everything she had at Hana, using techniques that had never failed her before. She moved faster than most eyes could follow, struck with the force of a meteor impact, and used her natural weapons with deadly precision. But with each passing minute, it became clear that Hana was winning. Not through superior strength or speed, but through pure adaptation and intelligence. She had figured out the timing of Jisoo's attacks, the rhythm of her breathing, even the subtle tells that indicated which technique she would use next. Every time Jisoo tried something new, Hana countered it perfectly within moments. The turning point came when Jisoo attempted her signature finishing move, a spinning attack that combined all 4 claws in a devastating spiral. It had never been blocked or evaded before, but Hana stepped directly into the attack's center, where the spinning motion created a brief gap and delivered a precise strike to Jisoo's solar plexus. The champion's own momentum did the rest. Kim Jisoo hit the arena floor hard and struggled to rise. For the first time in her career, she felt true exhaustion. Across from her, Hana waited patiently, not pressing her advantage. She had learned enough about Corvani culture to know that showing mercy to a defeated opponent was the highest form of respect. After a long moment, Jisoo raised her hand in surrender. The gesture sent shockwaves through the crowd. The undefeated champion had acknowledged defeat to a human who had never set foot in the arena before today. As the arbiter declared Hana the new champion, the silence in the arena was deafening. Then, slowly, Kim Jisoo began to clap. The sound echoed in the vast space, and one by one, other spectators joined in. By the time Hana was handed the champion's crown, the entire arena was applauding. Kim Jisoo stood in her private viewing chamber high above the main arena. The walls were made of transparent crystal that gave her a perfect view of every match. Her red armored skin reflected the lights from below, and her clawed hands gripped the railing as she watched the human continue to advance through the tournament bracket. This was not supposed to happen. For 5 years, Jisoo had held the championship title. She had defeated every challenger who dared to face her. The other species respected her strength and feared her skill. She had expected to face either Threx Queen Ziska or the 4-armed Valan destroyer Gorvek in the finals. Those were opponents worthy of her attention. She had never considered that a human might make. It passed the first day, but there was something deeply unsettling about how this Lee Hana fought. She did not rely on natural strength or speed like every other warrior Jisoo had faced. Instead, she seemed to learn and adapt during each match turning her opponent's strengths into weaknesses. It was like watching someone solve a puzzle while being attacked. When Hana had faced the armored Kristek warrior Borak, everyone expected the match to last hours. The Kristeks had shells harder than diamond and could absorb incredible amounts of damage. But Hana had found the tiny gaps in his armor plating, striking with surgical precision at the soft tissue underneath. The mighty Borak had fallen in less than 10 minutes against the shape-shifting. Morphin called Flux, the crowd had been sure the human would be confused by the constant changes in her opponent's form. But somehow, Hana had predicted which shape he would take next, staying one step ahead of his transformations, until she found his true vulnerable core. It was as if she could see patterns that others missed. The tournament continued through the night with matches broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly found themselves watching this small Earthwoman dismantle fighters who had been legendary for decades. Betting odds shifted dramatically as more and more spectators began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could go all the way. Jisoo watched each victory with growing concern. She had built her reputation on being unpredictable and overwhelmingly powerful. Her fighting style combined brutal strength with lightning-fast reflexes enhanced by her species' natural combat instincts. But Hana had shown that she could adapt to any fighting style within minutes of seeing it. The semi-final matches were about to begin, and Hana was facing Gorvek, the 4-armed Valan, who had been Jisoo's biggest rival for years. His 4 arms moved independently, creating an impossible web of attacks that had overwhelmed every previous opponent. Each arm was as strong as most creatures' entire bodies, and he could strike from 4 different angles simultaneously. The crowd expected this to be the end of the humans' incredible run. Gorvek was simply too much for any single opponent to handle. His fighting technique had been perfected over decades of combat, and he had never been defeated by anything other than superior strength. But as Jisoo watched the match begin, she realized that Hana had been studying Gorvek's pattern for hours. She had been watching every match, recording every movement, analyzing every tell. Gorvek's 4 arms began their deadly dance, creating a whirlwind of strikes that should have been impossible to defend against. But Hana moved between them like she was dancing to music. Only she could hear. She seemed to know where each arm would be before Gorvek himself decided. The turning point came when Jisoo noticed something that made her blood run cold. Hana was not just defending against Gorvek's attacks. She was learning the rhythm of his fighting style and preparing to counter it. Gorvek's left arms always moved a fraction of a second before his right ones. It was such a tiny tell that no one had ever noticed it before. But Hana had been watching for exactly that kind of pattern. She waited for the perfect moment when all four arms were committed to strikes that would miss their target. Then she moved. Hana slipped through the gap in Gorvek's defenses and struck a precise blow to his solar plexus. The impact sent shock waves through his entire body, disrupting the coordination between his four arms. For just a moment, he was vulnerable. That moment was all Hana needed. She followed up with a series of strikes to specific nerve points that she had memorized from studying Valan anatomy. Within seconds, Gorvek's four mighty arms hung useless at his sides, and he collapsed to the arena floor unconscious. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were completely silent, staring at this human who had just dismantled their expectations of what was possible. Jisoo felt something she had not experienced in years. Fear. Not fear of physical pain or injury. She had faced that countless times in her career. This was something deeper. A fear that everything she thought she knew about combat and strength might be wrong. For 5 years, she had dominated through superior physical abilities. Her natural armor could deflect most attacks. Her claws could cut through steel. Her leg muscles could propel her across an arena in a single bound. She had never needed to think deeply about strategy or technique, because raw power had always been enough. But this human fought like she was playing a game, several moves ahead. She seemed to understand her opponents better than they understood themselves, and now she was coming for the championship. The arena preparation chambers were connected by a series of corridors that allowed fighters to move between different areas. Jisoo found herself walking toward the section where Hana was resting before the final match. She told herself she was just curious about her upcoming opponent, but deep down she knew it was more than that. She needed to see this human up close, to understand what made her so different. Hana was sitting in a meditation pose on the floor of her preparation chamber. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was slow and steady. She did not look like a warrior who had just fought her way through the greatest tournament in the galaxy. She looked peaceful, almost serene. When Jisoo approached the transparent barrier that separated their chambers, Hana opened her eyes and looked directly at her. There was no fear in that gaze, no uncertainty, just a calm confidence that made Jisoo feel off balance. "You have been watching my matches," Hana said through the translation system. Why Jisoo was surprised by the directness of the question. Most opponents tried to intimidate each other before a championship fight. They made threats or boasted about their strength. But Hana seemed genuinely curious. "I am trying to understand how you do it," Jisoo admitted. "You have defeated opponents who should have been impossible for your species to beat." How Hana stood up and walked closer to the barrier. "Every species in the galaxy has spent millions of years evolving to be perfect at what they do. You became strong and fast and deadly. Your people are natural warriors." "That is correct," Jisoo replied with pride. That is also your weakness," Hana continued. "When you are naturally gifted at something, you never learn to think about it differently. You fight the way your instincts tell you to fight. You never consider that there might be better ways." Jisoo felt a flash of anger. How dare this weak creature suggest that her fighting style was flawed? But before she could respond, Hana continued. "I am not naturally strong or fast or tough. My species survived by learning to use tools and work together and think our way out of problems. When we fight, we cannot rely on natural gifts. We have to use our minds." The truth of those words hit Jisoo like a physical blow. She had never needed to think deeply about combat because her natural abilities had always been enough. But against an opponent who could think several moves ahead, those same natural abilities might become predictable patterns to be exploited. In 1 hour, we will face each other in the championship match. Hana said, I want you to know that I respect your skill and your strength. You are everything the records claimed you would be, and you, Jisoo found herself saying, are nothing like what I expected. Good, Hana replied with a small smile. That means my plan is working as... Jisoo walked back. To her own preparation chamber, she realized that for the first time in 5 years, she was not certain she would win. The human had already proven that she could defeat opponents who seemed impossible to beat. The question now was whether the champion could learn to fight in a completely new way in the next hour, or whether her reign was about to end at the hands of a species she had never considered a threat. The arena had been transformed for the championship match. Ancient combat protocols required that the final bout take place in a specially prepared ring, blessed by representatives from each major species. The crystal floor had been polished until it gleamed like a mirror, and ceremonial torches burned with flames of different colors, representing the various worlds that participated in galactic combat. Hana used the hour of preparation time to center herself. She sat in perfect stillness, letting her mind go blank and her body relax. Every muscle, every nerve, every thought had to be perfectly aligned for what was coming. She had studied Kim Jisoo for months, but studying was not the same as fighting. The champion would be faster and stronger than anything she had faced so far in her preparation chamber. Kim Jisoo paced back and forth, something she had never done before a fight. For 5 years, her prime match routine had been the same. Visualize victory, stretch her muscles, and enter the arena with complete confidence. But tonight felt different. The conversation with the human had planted seeds of doubt in her mind. What if natural ability was not enough? What if all her strength and speed meant nothing against an opponent who could think faster than she could move? The viewing areas around the arena were packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every major species had come to witness the championship match. Many had traveled across the galaxy just to be here. News crews were broadcasting live to billions of viewers on thousands of worlds. This was no longer just a tournament. It had become a galactic event park. Minho found a spot in the diplomatic viewing section where he could watch without being crushed by the larger alien spectators. His hands were shaking as he activated his recording equipment. Earth needed documentation of whatever happened next. Whether Hana won or lost, this would be remembered as the moment humanity either earned its place among the stars or learned the hard limits of what was possible. The betting networks showed odds that had shifted dramatically throughout the day. What had started as 1,000 to 1 against the human had narrowed to only 3 to 1. Some of the smartest gamblers in the galaxy were beginning to believe that this impossible upset might actually happen. High above the arena in the most exclusive viewing boxes, the leaders of various species watched with intense interest. If a human could defeat their greatest champion, it would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Species that had dominated through strength alone might find themselves reconsidering their entire approach to conflict and diplomacy. The arbiter entered the arena and the crowd gradually fell silent. His energy form pulsed with different colors as he spoke in a voice that reached every corner of the vast space. Citizens of the galaxy, tonight, we witness the final match of the grand tournament. The winner will hold the championship for 1 full galactic year and may claim any resource rights they desire for their species. He gestured toward one side of the arena. From the world of Korvax, 5-time defending champion, Kim Jisoo entered the arena to thunderous applause. She moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator, her red-armored skin gleaming under the ceremonial torches. Her clawed hands flexed as she acknowledged the crowd, and her eyes never left the spot where her opponent would appear from. the World of Earth first-time competitor Captain Lee Hana. The applause for Hana was more scattered and uncertain. Many spectators were still not sure what to make of this small human who had somehow fought her way to the championship. But there was genuine curiosity in the sound. They wanted to see what she could do against the legendary champion. Hana entered the arena wearing the same simple military uniform she had worn all day. She looked even smaller next to Jisoo, but she showed no signs of being intimidated. Her dark eyes swept the crowd once, then focused entirely on her opponent. The contrast between the two fighters was striking. Jisoo towered over Hana by more than 2 feet. Her 4 clawed hands could tear through most materials, and her leg muscles could propel her across the arena in a single leap. She radiated power and confidence like heat from a fire. Hana looked fragile by comparison. Her only weapons were her mind and her knowledge of fighting techniques, developed over thousands of years of human warfare. But there was something in her posture that made several spectators uncomfortable. She stood like someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. The two fighters approached the center of the arena, where ancient tradition required them to acknowledge each other before battle. Jisoo extended one clawed hand in the formal salute between warriors. Hana matched the gesture without hesitation. "You fought well to reach this point," Jisoo said. "Through the translation system, I will make your defeat quick and honorable." "Thank you," Hana replied. "I will try to make this interesting for you." Around the galaxy, billions of beings were gathered around viewing screens in homes and public spaces and military command centers. This was no longer just about resource rights or tournament victories. This had become a test of whether the newest species in the galaxy could stand equal with those who had ruled the stars for millennia. The Arbiter raised, his staff of pure energy preparing to signal the beginning of the match. Ancient betting pools closed as final wagers were placed. Children were put to bed early so adults could watch without distraction. Military leaders canceled meetings to observe how this human fought. "When this staff touches the ground, the match will begin," the Arbiter announced. "The fight continues until surrender or incapacitation. Are both fighters ready?" Jisoo nodded her agreement, her entire body tensing like a coiled spring. She had decided to end this quickly, with overwhelming force. The human had shown skill against lesser opponents, but this was different. This was for the championship. Hana simply said yes, but her voice carried to every corner of the arena despite its quiet tone. The staff began to descend toward the crystal floor in the diplomatic viewing section. Park Min-ho held his breath. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. If Hana won, they would have mining rights too, the richest system in their sector of space. If she lost, they would remain trapped in their dying solar system until they found another way to expand in the elite viewing boxes. Alien leaders leaned forward with interest. A human victory would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about strength and combat. It would mean that intelligence and adaptability might be more valuable than natural physical gifts. In homes across 1,000 worlds, children watched with wide eyes. As the small human prepared to face the legendary champion, adults who had never heard of Earth suddenly found themselves hoping this unknown species might accomplish the impossible. The staff touched the ground with a sound like thunder. Both fighters moved at the same instant. Jisoo's opening attack was everything her reputation promised. A combination of claws and kicks delivered with devastating speed and precision. It was the same assault that had ended dozens of championship fights in the opening seconds, but Hana was not there when the attacks landed. She had already begun to study Jisoo's patterns, noting the slight pause between her claw strikes and the way her weight shifted before each leap. The champion was incredibly fast, but speed meant nothing if your opponent knew where you were going to be. The first exchange lasted exactly 30 seconds and ended with both fighters circling each other warily. Jisoo had expected to end this immediately, but the human had not only survived her opening assault, but had managed to land 2 solid strikes on her supposedly impenetrable armor. For the first time in 5 years, Kim Jisoo felt truly challenged. In the hours following her victory, Captain Lee Hana found herself at the center of a phenomenon that was spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone could have imagined. News of her triumph was being transmitted through quantum communication. Networks to every inhabited system reaching the furthest corners of known space within minutes of the championship match ending. The species that had dismissed humanity as lucky primitives who had stumbled into space travel were suddenly reconsidering everything they thought they knew about these newcomers. The betting networks that had offered 1,000-to-1 odds against the human were now scrambling to pay out the few gamblers who had been brave or foolish enough to back her Park Min-ho still. Stunned by what he had witnessed, found himself handling diplomatic requests from dozens of different species representatives who had barely acknowledged his presence before the tournament were now requesting immediate meetings with him. Some wanted trade agreements, others offered military alliances. A few were asking if Earth had more fighters like Hana. The immediate prize was exactly what they had come for. Earth would receive full mining rights to the Kepler system, ensuring humanity's survival and expansion into the galaxy. The rich asteroid fields and rare mineral deposits would provide everything needed to build new colonies and develop better technology. But the real victory was something much more valuable than mining rights. Humanity had earned respect. Within 6 hours of the championship match, ending the first official alliance offer arrived. It came from the Threx, whose insectoid civilization had dominated military strategy for centuries. They wanted to establish a joint training program to study human combat techniques. Their message was direct and to the point. Your species has shown abilities we did not know existed. We wish to learn from each other. The Valans were next, with an offer to share their advanced spacecraft technology. In exchange for military training, their 4 armed warriors had been considered unbeatable until Hana defeated Gorvek in the semi-finals. Now they wanted to understand how humans approached combat differently. Even the proud Corvani, through Kim Jisoo, herself extended an invitation for cultural exchange. The former champion had spent hours analyzing recordings of her defeat, trying to understand how she had been outmaneuvered by an apparently weaker opponent. What she discovered changed her entire perspective on warfare. I have been thinking about what you said, Jisoo told Hana during a private meeting after the ceremony. You were right that we never learned to change. We became so good at fighting one way that we never considered there might be better ways. Hana listened respectfully as the former champion continued. Your species is young, but you have something we lost long ago. You still know how to adapt and grow. We forgot that there is always more to learn. The conversation was being recorded and would later be broadcast across Corvani space, where it would spark a revolution in their military thinking. For the first time in their history, they began to question whether their traditional methods were truly the best possible. Approaches, as news of the tournament spread to more distant systems, the reactions varied dramatically. Some species were thrilled to learn that the galaxy had a new type of warrior to respect. Others were concerned about what this might mean for the existing balance of power. A few began making plans to test themselves against human fighters to see if this victory had been a fluke. But the most significant change was happening in how the various species viewed conflict itself. For millennia, galactic disputes had been settled through demonstrations of raw strength. The biggest, fastest, most naturally gifted warriors had dominated because superior physical abilities usually determined the outcome. Hana's victory proved that intelligence and adaptability could be more valuable than natural gifts. It suggested that any species, no matter how physically limited, might be able to compete at the highest levels if they were smart enough and creative enough in their approach. The philosophical, Implications rippled through academic institutions across the galaxy universities that had focused on breeding programs to create stronger warriors suddenly found themselves developing new courses in strategy psychology and adaptive combat techniques. Meanwhile, Hana herself was adapting to her new role as Galactic Champion. The title came with responsibilities she had not expected. She was required to make regular public appearances and give interviews to news networks. The crystal crown was beautiful, but it was also surprisingly heavy, both physically and symbolically. Every word she spoke was analyzed by experts from hundreds of different worlds. Her fighting techniques were being studied frame by military academies throughout the galaxy. Young warriors from dozens of species were already trying to copy her movements, though few understood the deeper principles behind her methods. The most interesting development came from an unexpected source. The Arbiter, the ancient energy being, who had overseen the tournament for centuries, requested a private meeting with Hana No.